So Beers with Bill welcomes back Cam Bartel. We're going to have a conversation about wine. It's one of a dozen interests that Cam has. And I don't know if I need to make any kind of introduction because you all know him or work with him. So Cam, take it away.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Bill. Okay. Welcome to Wines with Will. I am Cam. I'll be your host tonight as we take a trip through the Niagara region's what it has to offer for especially certain hybrid varietals. Just before we get going here, I'm just going to change my format around a little bit. So I'm guessing people wanted to probably have some of the drinks while we're talking. So instead of talking about the grape a bit later on, I thought we'd just do a quick chat about it right now. Is anybody having the wine tonight, first off? Just out of curiosity's sake. You don't have to, by the way. Some people are. Okay, cool. Does anybody go for the entry level Baco Noir tonight? The $13 one, whatever? Nobody. So
we bought 3.
We bought all 4.
Okay. That's cool. Yeah, awesome. You did not have to do that. That's super cool.
Oh,
okay,
I was curious.
Fair. The entry level one is like $13 or $14. Still a solid bottle. Is anybody going for the old vines besides Derek and Naomi? The old vines? Yep, cool, nice, cool. Anybody going for the reserve, Spec Family Reserve?
Right here.
That one? And Ian, cool, and yep, myself as well, actually. Did anybody besides myself and Derek have more money than sense tonight and go for the ridiculously priced one?
We're not
okay, myself and Derek, good choices.
We're not cracking a nice one tonight, Cam. I decided we're just gonna drink the bottom 3.
That's totally understandable.
I just thought I'd buy it. Why not?
To be clear, we're not drinking 3 bottles of wine.
I mean, respect to you, man. That's just cool.
I started a couple days ago. We're phasing.
Right on, right on. Is anybody familiar with Baco Noir? First off, at the top, hands. Has anybody ever tried it before? Nobody. Couple people. Okay, couple people. Sweet. Okay. So
Before
basically,
I got pregnant, the Baco Noir, like the base level one, was my go-to wine.
Yeah.
And then
nice.
after I had the baby, I can't drink it anymore. I don't like it anymore.
Okay. You're.
But I like the upgrade one.
Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. Okay. Anywho, so yeah, I'm going to be popping open the Spec Family Reserve as well. I've had the crazy guy, the $29 bottle open for about a week now, actually, which is, I know, crazy is crazy. Normally don't want to do that, but I opened it for an occasion. It was really good, so I put it in the fridge to see if it would last for a week or so I can compare it between the other guys. Anyway, long story short, for those of you who aren't too versed in Baco Noir, it's an interesting grape for me because it has a lot to do with the Niagara area especially, even though it is a French grape in origin. Like a lot of the grapes that we make into wine, it comes from historically from France. It is a hybrid grape, which means it is a grape that was synthetically produced or made by a guy named Francois Baco in the late 20th century, which is the 1900s, right? Oh, I was looking backwards. It's either late 1800s or early 1900s, which is the 20th century. It's the one after. Anyway, you guys know what I'm talking about. About 100 years ago, over 100 years ago, anyway. It was created by this gentleman, Francois Baco, basically to try and get around, I'm going to say phylloxera, Bill. Does that sound like the pronunciation of the disease that you are aware of? Okay. Yeah. So as a vine disease that was a problem in France about 120 years ago or so, and this is why this
still a prevalent problem.
Still a prevalent problem?
Still a prevalent problem. They still have to be careful. They get it once in a while and it wipes out vines.
Okay. Baco Noir was bred to be resilient to that anyway, was the idea. Never really got a whole lot of favor, I don't think, with the French drinking population, partially because it may be viewed as like a bastard son. I don't know for sure. But anyway, if you're looking at the wine right now, unfortunately my lighting in this room is atrocious, but what I love about this wine, both of these ones that I have here, it's going to be very, very deep purple, just like the smoke on the water, if you will. It's going to be almost like a very crimsony, bloody kind of color, which would make you think it's going to be a very big wine as well, with a lot of tannins, a lot of bitterness possibly. But generally speaking, I find this wine to be very approachable. You can even drink it by itself, I find. I opened the big one I had, Lost Boys edition. I had that one with wine, and it was really nice with that. But this wine isn't. It's very drinkable by itself. So I'm just going to try the Spec family first. I have had this guy before. I did you guys the favor in asking Bill for his tasting notes on these because he's much better at this than I am. I'm going to say probably ripe stone fruit. A little bit of smoke on this one too. Bill, what are your thoughts on the Spec family?
So Spec family is interesting because it's a real departure from the way Henry Pelham makes the Back Noir to begin with. And so mine's been uncorked for half an hour. I don't know what your opinion is about an aerator, but I prefer to let my bottle breathe. And I was actually down in the cellar before the show tonight, going through what I've got, because I thought I had a Back Noir from Henry Pelham in the cellar. I was going to pull it up and try it, but unfortunately I was mistaken. I think my wife got it beforehand, maybe last year.
Nice.
So I started out with the cork, pull out the cork, and the first thing I did was smell the cork.
Yep.
And what I got was a back end light, smoky aroma, and a very heavy front end, almost toffee flavor. And so this is stereotypic of a Back Noir that's done with the age on the vines. They've got more than 15 years on the vines. It tends to express itself as that style of a light toffee front tone, dark chocolate coffee in the middle, and then you're going to get some smoke at the finish.
Yep. Yeah. Very. I mean, you don't get a whole lot of tannins on it, though, eh, Bill? Like you don't really need a hunk of meat to drink this wine.
You get almost zero tannins on it.
Yeah.
So there's it's smooth, so there's no bitterness to it from that. And you're not getting any oak either.
These are oak for look like months though, man. This is oak for a while.
It's oak for at least 3 months.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the actual wine itself. While I'm guessing you're going to be sipping while I'm blabbering on for an hour or so about wine. So you're welcome in advance. Please sip away, drink the whole bottle if you want. What I would recommend actually is based on what Bill said. I have noticed that this wine, like a lot of good wines actually, will probably taste different, aka possibly better the next day. So if you could leave a glass in the bottle and not polish the whole thing off, leave it corked till tomorrow, and try it again, you might think it actually opens up a bit more, is a bit more approachable. It's the Miroslav, the peace lover. Okay, right on. Welcome, Miro. Yeah. So basically, why I wanted to pick wine today is we talked a lot about beer. Normally, I'm a beer guy. I like my beer. I'm a Belgian guy. Not everybody likes Belgian beers. The time of year, I thought I'd maybe try something a bit different. So we haven't talked a lot about wine, but we have talked a lot about local stuff. And I want to talk supportive of the Niagara area, especially. But originally, when I was young, I hated wine. I never liked it. That goes back to my parents' selection in wine. They were known for, I would call it buying in bulk, if you will. I can remember memories of Hochtaler sitting around the table and possibly some Black Tower, if you're familiar with those wines. I remember trying them and I couldn't tell the difference between that and low quality paint remover. So for me, there always was no nuance or interest at all in wine whatsoever. It took fast forward 20 years almost, and when I first started working at a place called Oliver Bonaccini, which like most places I've worked at is now closed. True story. Most places I've worked in the restaurant industry are now closed. They did do a really good job though of instructing, like getting the servers or the employees to appreciate wine by trying good wine, essentially. So they had horizontal tastings where you take a bunch of the same year of different wines and try them together to notice the differences and nuances. And I think we actually did some vertical tasting as well, where you'd have the same exact bottle, but from 3 different years. So you can try and see how the weather perhaps or how the aging process has changed the wine. So that's when I first started drinking beer. Wine was in my late 20s, and then you get into the problem where once you start drinking good wine, Naomi, as you can attest to, it's very difficult to go back to drinking bad wine, which is not, it's a good problem to have, but it's a problem nonetheless. So why did I pick Henry Pelham today? First off, because they do, I would say, probably one of the best known, if not best, Baco Noirs in Ontario. They're from Niagara, of course. And when I was working for Oliver Bonacini, I actually was privileged to go to a wine scholarship program at Henry Pelham, where they talked a little bit about, you know, wine industry in Niagara, what it's like to actually make the wine, a tour of the premises, that kind of thing. And it was a great experience. And I thought I just, you know, this is not a paid promotion. I'm not getting any money from these guys. In fact, I spent way too much on their product already. But it was a great experience, and it taught you, just to put a bit more, I don't want to say this, I guess, focus on quality, or just paying attention to what you're tasting. So that's kind of how I got into wine. And that got me thinking about, you know, the Ontario wine industry, and about how we kind of differ we differ from the rest of the world when it comes to our wine consumption and things like that. For example, does anybody want to hazard a guess as to when I was writing my wine scholarship program, what the average price of wine was per bottle, people paid per bottle? This is back about 10 years ago or so. Or what was considered, you know, the premium marker? Anybody want to hazard a guess? You can, $10 says Graham. Cool. Cool, good guess. Okay. The answer, well, I think it was $12.65. So by far, I think it was about 90% of the population drinks wine less than $12.65 a bottle. This is again 10 years ago. So if you're buying a $13 bottle, you're already in the top 10% of, if not top 10, and the 10% of people who buy that type of wine. If you hit $20, you are now, I think, into the like the 90, is it the 99th percentile? Like only 1% of people essentially buy that wine. And to me, the difference between, you know, $13 and $20 is literally $7, but it's also a difference in the actual wine, I find, as well. So these days, does anybody have an idea what the average price of Ontario grown wine, like VQA, not like Ontario International Blend, what that averages out at? Anybody know or care, or any of your thoughts? I can't see anything. Shrug says 14. Good guess in chat. The answer to the question is actually 15, which again, that puts us into, like, that's a substantial price. A lot of people would balk at that and would not want to pay that. BC averages for a BC grown wine $18 a bottle. A lot of people would say these prices are ridiculous, outrageous. Why would I buy this garbage when I could just buy a Chilean Malbec and then drown my sorrows in bulk? Valid questions. These are things you could ask. These are reasonable things that a frugal person should be asking those questions. There are a lot of differences, though, in the Ontario and Canadian wine industry that puts them very behind, I would say, competitors internationally. Bill, what do you think? You're looking in, I don't know if it's any tale at a school here, but you've done some research into the wine industry yourself. What are your thoughts on the differences between Canada's wine industry and those internationally?
Oh, wow. That's a wide open question, Cam.
Regards to
competition. Canada suffers from a couple of issues that I struggle with. One, mass market wine sales in North America are geared towards sugary sweet reds and whites. And internationally, people like full-bodied reds and whites. And so the Canadian industry has to be really careful about its export market. The bulk of our export market was Chinese, and the occasional well-crafted wine from some of the exclusive ones that I go to in Niagara, we're exporting to Europe. They're premium reserves because they were classified as almost as good as the Bordeaux region.
Okay.
So.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that. Yeah, it's a weird one. I don't know about consumer demand like you're talking about. That I didn't know about. I view, for me, Ontario, there are two great wine movies. If you were asking me about what movies I would recommend for wine, there are two of them. One stars Paula Giamatti, who I'm guessing those of you who are wine fans might be familiar with the movie Sideways. This is not about this. My anecdote is not about this. It's about the other one called Bottle Shock. Has anyone ever heard of Bottle Shock? Nobody. Wow. Okay.
No, I've heard of it, man.
You've heard of it? Okay, one. I'll take it. All right. Bottle Shock is a movie. I think it stars Captain Kirk, aka Chris Pine. For those of you ladies and/or gentlemen. It's about the 1970s. How wine in California, for example, was always thought to be globally inferior to that in the old world. So the Bottle Shock story is, I think it's based on the true story of how a winery in California managed to submit I want to say Chardonnay, but a white wine anyway, into the French championships, and with a blind tasting actually won the championship. So that kind of took some big steps into removing the stigma surrounding New World, I guess, but California specifically wines. Yeah. I feel that Ontario hasn't had its Bottle Shock moment yet, if I could be like that. So Ontario is I think somebody mentioned it. Who mentioned this, Bill? Somebody mentioned Baby Duck like a week ago or 2 weeks ago. Does that sound right? Somebody was talking about it.
I don't recall that, but somebody may have.
Yeah, I was thinking about wine, my wine chat, so it stuck out to me. But a lot of people who are from Ontario think of Baby Duck when they think of Ontario wines, or just like you were saying, super sweet. I think Baby Duck was carbonated. Bill, is that right? Effervescent?
Mildly carbonated.
Yeah, so they think of just crappy wines that are high alcohol, or possibly high alcohol, just not known for consumption really. And that goes back to the history of the climate and stuff. And one of the advantages of the Baco Noir is that it's a hardier grape. That's one of the reasons why it's grown in Niagara. Again, it can withstand the Canadian winters a bit. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to pick this one as well. Because although France kind of jettisoned it into the annals of history, it is an annal, right, Bill? It's not the other one?
Yeah.
I think it's an annal. Okay. Canada kind of picked it up, partly out of necessity and partly because it flourished here. So, like you mentioned, I think Henry Pelham has some of the oldest Baco Noir vines in Niagara. I'm pretty sure in that range.
Yeah,
I think
he does.
Does that sound right to you?
I think he's got the oldest Baco Noir in Niagara right now.
Yeah. And Bill, you're the wine vine guy. I know a little bit about what the age of the vines does to the wine, but perhaps you could talk about, what exactly does the older vines differentiate newer vines?
Well, there's a vineyard, and it's a new name now, and I unfortunately have not looked it up to find it. I should have. When it was bought 17 years ago by a gentleman, Bill Mahaney, he allowed the viticulture school in Niagara to dig on his property to see how far down the vine roots were. And it had been planted in Concord grapes because we were the #1 Concord grape producers in the world for grape juice.
Yeah. So just for those of you
in the Niagara region, because they grow anywhere, but they grow great in Niagara. Mm-hmm. And his vines had been in the ground 50 years. And the roots were 76 feet down in the soil.
Right.
You don't even need rainfall to get your vines. And what he did was he grafted onto all of those the year that he bought it. And the following year, 1999, he won 6 major worldwide awards for his wines.
Okay.
Because you've got the depth of the roots give you the terroir, the taste of the soil. And
what about how old is too old? Because some people they rip up their vines and replant. I want to say 40 years. Does that sound right to you, or is that wrong?
So if you're going to pull your vines out, you'll pull them out between 15 and 25, because after 25 years, your production drops almost 40%. The quality of the wine goes up probably 50%, but the production goes down 40%. So if you're a commodity producer, you'll rip out the vines quite early.
Yeah.
And replant.
that kind of goes into what I mentioned earlier about like costing of wine and stuff. So if your yield, like yield in Ontario, guys, is FYI, I looked this up. Yield in Ontario is 40% of like Australia per acre, probably based on climate and other things like that. But if your yield for like an old vine is even worse than that, then even though the quality of wine is better,
Yeah,
you're not selling much of it essentially, right?
and at the other side of the coin, Rothschild, which, you know, the famous wealthy name, they have vineyards in France that have had the grapevines in the ground 475 years.
Same vines.
Their runs are 1,500 to 2,000 bottles off of like 4 rows of vines, and they're getting $2,000 to $4,000 a bottle for it.
Yeah, right.
You know, but that's a level of wine snobbery that I don't think any of us can afford to pursue.
Touche.
And if you can, all power to you.
What do you? Okay, so I'm pretty sure some of these the higher tier end bottles that we're trying tonight have probably been pruned as well, so to drop some of the excess fruit. Bill, does that sound like a process that would have been done to these wines?
So it's a little more complex than that, but
Please.
you will cut back your production to get better grapes. So they call it pruning the roots, but you're actually pruning off the vines.
Yeah.
And you'll do that the middle of the summer. You'll actually cut back half of your production to get a higher quality grape.
Okay. Yeah. Nice.
And I do believe Henry Pelham does that with their old vines.
I think so too.
In certain years for the climate.
Yeah. Okay.
Because even with their old vines, because his old vines are probably almost 40 years now.
That's right. I think mid-80s.
They still need rainfall.
Yeah.
Frequently to produce a great quality Baco Noir.
Right. Yeah. One thing I didn't know when looking into the like researching the Baco Noir a bit is just one of the reasons it does well in Ontario is I think it has a faster ripening time, so it's allowed to stay on the vines a bit longer, which is why like some of my complaints about reds made in Ontario is that they seem a bit underripe or a bit tastes like vegetal would be the word I would use, like a green pepper kind of notes, which
herbaceous, vegetable.
Herbaceous. Things that I try and avoid when I think of wine, but it's stylistically it works, I guess. But ripening season for Bacos is a lot faster apparently, which is why they can have a lot more of these full sweet fruit kind of thing going on, which is kind of cool as well, I thought anyway. Is anybody any thumbs up in the chat? Is anybody liking this wine so far? Does anybody like wish they hadn't got? Well, okay, so Troy's in. Okay, sweet. Brian's got 2. Is that a thumb up? I can't tell. He's possibly asleep and or a wax dummy. I can't tell. Oh no. Okay, cool. All right.
He's just listening.
He's just listening intently. Very good. Okay. Yeah. For those of you who are trying multiples, Derek, are you still here? I can't see you. Have you got? What do you guys have? You guys have a favorite so far of the 2?
Computer died. I'm working on it.
We're on my phone. Just a huge difference between we haven't opened the nicest bottle, but the number 3 bottle is so different than the first 2.
I was joking in the chat that I've always called this bacon wine.
Yes.
Now, in the spec, I get like a massive salty, smoky nose. Like I'm getting total bacon out of it, which is surprising me.
Yeah.
Just doing a goofy wordplay.
That's cool, man. That's cool. It's a good one. I think it's really a bit underappreciated. Because like I said, it's in France. It doesn't have a good name behind it. You know, especially if you tell a French guy you're a fan of Canadian wine, he would probably spit and or scoff in your face. Historically, that would be probably the right move. But the point of this anecdote is that Ontario has come a long way in 30, 40 years or so from making. Like Bill was saying, Concord grapes, which are those used for grape jelly, into wine, moving into hybrids like Baco Noir, which again is more hearty. I'm glad your beer is good, Jen, Megan, and Lori, whoever's drinking the beer, awesome. I hope you went for that M Canadian I recommended. And then moving into actual, real, what we call the noble vines like Cabernet Sauvignon, Riesling. Basically almost anything that's grown in the world right now is grown in Niagara. I would say there's probably a couple exceptions to that, Bill, but generally speaking, most people have tried to grow, I would say, most grapes. Are you aware of any varietal that stands out not being made in Niagara, at least tried? Off the top of the, I'm just making conversation, Bill. It's,
You don't want to go down that road.
okay, we will not go down that road. Fair enough.
I'm one of those snobs that find that probably 95% of Niagara wines are too thin for my liking.
Okay. Okay.
Having-
My point.
Having put it that way, the Baco Noir, the Cabernet Franc, which are both early growing reds,
Yeah.
done properly, rival not the high end
Yeah.
houses in France, but they do rival the regular wine houses in France for
Right.
quality of grapes and quality of wine.
Just to throw an asterisk on my comment, I was saying that they have tried. I didn't say that they were necessarily dominating in their growth attempts, but I would say we're probably closer to the German climate as far as growth wise. Like Rieslings do well here, wines like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chardonnay, Riesling.
Yeah.
The hybrids that are designed for North American climates, I've forgotten. I've got a list of them in my book on the other side of the computer. We're known for those.
Yeah.
We can't rival. We can rival Bordeaux, by the way. Most people don't understand that 90% of Bordeaux wines are actually a vegetal in their flavoring.
Yeah, that's right.
The full-bodied, robust reds
Yeah.
only happen about once every 3 years when they get the right combination of sunlight and rainfall at the right times.
Totally
The rest
agree.
of the time, Cabernet Franc gets a bad rap here because it's a little bit herbaceous at times,
Yes, it is.
and it's because we have too much rain in the fall to
Mm,
allow it to mature.
that's fair enough. Yeah.
And which is why a lot of people have gone from the Cabernet Franc to the Baco Noir, because it's got just a slightly shorter growing season, so you don't have that much risk.
Right.
But
No, that's a
they
good point, though.
rival the quality of the lower houses in Bordeaux, no problem.
I think the problem is that people are, when you think of red wines, you're comparing like places like California or Australia or other hot climate growth where they get a lot more big red fruit, super like sweet, big bodied normally. Whereas in Ontario, you wouldn't get that normally.
But the wine industry goes through states of flux all the time.
It's true.
You know, you couldn't have got an oak Chardonnay 15 years ago anywhere in the world, except for the high-end houses in Europe.
Oh, sacrilege, I know.
And now you get nothing but oak Chardonnays everywhere, and it's almost impossible to find unoaked Chardonnays.
Thank goodness. The masses coming to their senses. I agree, Bill.
And Cabernet Franc, which is one of my favorites, had a resurgence back in 1980. People were planting it. It got planted all over the world. And then by 1990, it died off. People were ripping the vines out of the ground. Now in 2020, I'm reading all these sommeliers and wine documents, and people are loving it.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Cab Franc, okay.
So there's a cycle that happens in the wine industry.
Definitely.
So.
Definitely true, yeah. Naomi and or possibly Derek had a question for you, Bill.
What would I consider a high-end Ontario wine?
I like the smile already. This is great.
No,
I think she is.
just because you said that high-end Ontario wines can match the basic French.
How much money you want to spend?
No, that's what I'm asking. What is your
So if you're gonna rival the lower end Bordeaux houses, you're gonna be spending $50 a bottle for a wine. The problem for that is there are far too many great wines between $15 and $20. If you're not interested in cellaring a wine, you shouldn't be spending $50 a bottle for it, unless you're in a restaurant, because the LCBO's just got way too much selection in an affordable range. You know, I'm drinking the Spec Family Reserve. It's got a lot more body than just their Baco Noir. It's $21. I think $21.95. I think is what I paid for it today. It's $3 off right now.
Yeah.
You could buy this, throw it in your cellar for a year. It would still taste like a really good wine a year from now, maybe 2 years from now. I don't think you would cellar it past that. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with this wine unless you're talking to someone who's got a palate for really full, deep-bodied reds. In which case, this is just not got as much backbone.
Now, will it decline at the 2-year mark, or it just won't improve anymore? So there's no point in cellaring it further.
Everything's more to your personal taste. So I had friends over a couple of weeks ago. We were outside on the patio with the patio heater on, and I pulled a bottle out of the cellar and I uncorked it. I tasted it. I put the bottle down and I went back down in the cellar and I got a second bottle because the first one was like, wow, I left this one a year too long. Most of the bottles in my cellar, I paid between $25 and $45 for a bottle. And most of them have sat there somewhere between 6 and 7 years. So, and that's only because I didn't move my cellar when I moved 7 years ago. I drank it up before I moved. And then I started rebuilding it.
I was just wondering, this one in particular, you say it will only cellar about 2 years, you figure. Is that
has
is that a preference thing?
When I was down in the cellar, I was thinking I should probably do a class on cellaring wine once we can sit somewhere. Graham at Counterpoint has offered his space once the restrictions get lifted. And I'll probably do a cellar class then because the guys at Southbrook would be willing to help me out by pulling bottles out of their cellar.
Nice.
Because there's a without being an hour-long conversation, there's reasons why you would choose wines to throw in a cellar, and most of them have nothing to do with how thick it is or what the alcohol content is. It's more to do with how it's structured right now. And most wines are bottled when they should be drank, particularly in North America.
Yeah. Not
all of them, but most of them should be. They're being bottled when you're supposed to drink them.
Like 95%, Bill. It's a huge number.
Oh, probably closer to 99% right now.
Okay. Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like the one you're drinking right now, Derek, is like a 2017, right? The vintage is 2017. So
got in 18 here.
Okay. Well, by the way, I mean, they've already done some aging for you, and that they're releasing it when they think it's good to be drunk, I believe, is the idea.
So I was reading the spec. They when they released this a year ago, they said, well, not quite a year ago, they said that you could buy this and put it in a cellar for a maximum 5 years.
Yeah, sure. I've done longer just for fun to see what happens, and some wines are they're fine. Some of them, like Bill said, they do fade away. Like you might lose I think the bright fruit goes first. Bill, does that sound right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you lose some of the brightness of like the sweet fruit that you get. This guy again, Derek, if you leave this guy for a day or so, open put the cork back in and leave it, you might notice some of the smoke goes away. You get more fruit possibly too. So that's a deterrent. You may not want to do that. But all those fruit notes kind of go away. This guy here that I'm drinking on the side, you guys, I'm kind of double fisting here. That's the Lost Boys version. That one has got a lot more fruit off the top, which would probably be gone after 8 years probably.
How long does that one linger? Because I've never had the Lost Boys.
I would never buy this wine except that my interest was piqued. So again, it's been open for a few days, but it lasts for a while, Bill. But it's a smooth finish though. There's not a whole lot of it doesn't.
No, I mean when you're drinking it, how long does the flavor sit in your mouth?
Hold on. 5 to 8 seconds. Nope. 12 seconds.
12 seconds.
Still a little bit there. So 15 and a half seconds, Bill. It's actually, you can still taste it actually still. Yeah. It lingers. It's just like the Cranberries' first album, Anybody?
So what I recommend between the furnace and the hot water heater, absolutely, if you don't want to get much age out of all of it, put it in the back of your closet and just leave it alone.
So I used when I lived on the 3rd floor of an apartment building that had no air conditioning, but instead of made up for it by its rat, cockroach, and bed bug content. I had my wine cellar in my closet there because I had nowhere else to put it, and surprisingly, nothing actually went off. So, Graham, I would say, buy a couple hundred, few $1,000s of wine, pop it beside your water heater, and see what happens. What's the worst that could happen? You can start the Graham Hardy vinegar business. It sounds great. Sweet.
I think the furnace and the hot water heater is probably the wrong spot, but in a closet's not bad. What you don't want when you're cellaring wine is huge temperature shifts in a short period of time.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Okay. So I thought I'd just have a quick chat about. I was reading about what makes Ontario wine. Talking about price again. Why is Ontario so unapproachable, or why is Canada so unapproachable? So a couple fun facts about Ontario and Canada wine. First off, like I mentioned, yield in Ontario, probably I'm guessing the same in BC, partially because of the climate, possibly the growing season is shorter. I don't know what the actual variables are. Those are just a couple of hypotheses. But yield per acre is a lot lower in Canada than in hot climates. So it doesn't matter how many acres you have, the yield per acre is the problem, not per vine. Well, I guess per vine probably as well. Labor costs as well makes a huge difference in Canada versus places like Argentina or Chile. Land cost currently is way up. Niagara is not a cheap place to move in case you were planning on retiring there. You might want to have bought your land about 25, 30 years ago. And this thing I found out, I think me and Bill had a quick anecdotal chat yesterday about percentage of wine that goes to the winery when you buy your bottle of wine, and it's depressingly low. So of the $22, so let's say of the $22 you purchased for this wine, approximately $7 went to the actual winery, and the rest went to taxes, fees, licensing, blah blah blah, all government stuff. So yeah, wineries, over 70% of the sticker price on wines, on Ontario wines, are taxes and fees. This kind of probably mimics other industries, I guess, for alcohol, but that's pretty bad. And then you have things like importing barrels. Canada doesn't. I don't think Canada, the Canadian oak scene exists, but I don't think Canada's not really known for its cooperage as well, I would say. So a lot of barrels are imported from either France or America, I believe, right, Bill, for most aging?
Yeah.
So
yeah. American oak.
Yeah, this is like hops. If you're buying stuff from America right now, you're paying 1.5 times the price or whatever. So there's a couple of reasons that need to take into account, like of why Ontario wines is so expensive. I mean, it's a part of it. There's a lot of variables that are going into this, really, essentially, I would say. Whether or not that justifies in your mind of the necessity of supporting industry, but it's just something of note. Just so we're all aware, 33% of consumed wine in Canada is domestic. So by a large majority, most people are drinking imported wine in Canada. Does that matter? I mean, not really. I mean, it's a note. Compare that to Italy, for example, and you get over 90% of wine consumed is domestic. France is a little bit above us, I think in the 60s, I think. And so there are other countries that are, way up there as far as what they choose to drink. But Canada, I think it's kind of like the craft beer scene. It's always increasing in consumption or percentage of market share, but it's still a relatively small niche, I guess, if you want to call it that. Yeah. Any thoughts on that, Bill?
Yeah, I got lots of thoughts on that.
Okay.
The two things came to mind when you were talking. The first time I've been back to Paris to visit family in the late 1990s. She goes, Bill, go to the grocery store and get a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
So I hike the 11 blocks, because they were way out on the end of the 11 blocks to the grocery store, walked in and took a look at the wall of wine, walked all the way back to ask her what a good bottle of wine costs in France, because there was literally 1.5 euros all the way up to 55 euros for a bottle
Right.
of wine. And I'm sitting there going, I have no idea what a quality bottle of wine is here
Yep.
because the tax structure is so different.
Yep. Yeah. I was the same way. I was in, I think my last day in Paris, so my first time there, I decided I wanted to get a decent bottle of French wine. So I went to an actual wine shop and I tried my best in my, believe it or not, yeah, I do have a French minor technically, but I don't really use my French at all. So I tried to babble my way, trying to explain what I wanted. And the guy recommended an 11 euro bottle, which is nothing compared to Canadian prices. And it was fantastic. The best wine by far I'd had all trip, because I was paying, 2.5, 3 euros just to buy a bottle of wine to just drink by the Eiffel Tower kind of thing. So yeah, it's a big difference.
Yeah. So mass market wines versus what I would call wine snob wines, which is more the way I drink. Mass market wines are geared to people that know very little about the wine market. Like I said, North America suffers from a problem where we sugar a lot of stuff because we have a sweet tooth. So we like sweeter things.
Sure.
So we're not looking for dry wines, we're looking for sweet wines. And if you're going to run a winery in Ontario, which market are you going to cater to? The 5% of people who truly understand wine, or the 95% of people who are going to buy wine?
Right. Yeah.
And I have made the mistake in the past of pulling wine out of my cellar for my wife's girlfriends when they come over to the house.
Yeah. And
I now just go to the LCBO and look for the cheapest bottle of white wine I can find.
Yeah, for sure. Fusion, totally.
And I shouldn't say the cheapest, but like anything that's around $13, $14 a bottle, that's what I grab.
That still puts you in the premium market, Bill.
No, I'm not sure Jackie's going to be appreciating that comment. You need to filter it a little bit.
No. Jackie would agree with you. My wife doesn't like sugary sweet wines. She calls them her girlfriend wines.
Right.
Okay, just checking. I just don't want you to get in trouble.
No, most of my male friends don't drink wine; they drink beer. So,
yeah, that's fair.
Ha! Really?
Yeah. Cam is the only guy that I've actually probably gone down to Niagara on a wine tour with.
You got to get better friends, Bill. There's too many beer drinkers in your party.
What can I say? I grew up in a blue-collar environment.
And you seem to hang around with blue-collar people like us.
Yeah, for sure.
So now that we've gone down that rabbit hole, we'll try to extricate ourselves out of it.
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so the first thing you should do with your wine is you should swirl it around in your glass like that. The easiest way to do it's actually on a table so you don't splash around. And what you're looking for is how it sits up on the edge of the glass. So this one actually, as you finish swirling it, rises up almost 2 millimeters on the edge of the glass. And what that tells you is the viscosity is heavy enough that it's actually got some backbone in it.
Are you looking for Bill what those ZZ Top fellows talked about? Does this wine have legs that you're talking about?
Yeah, it's got legs, a backbone to it.
Got
You
it.
swirl it around and see whether or not, as it starts to settle, that the wine actually does this against the wall of the glass. Oh. But that's the wine snob.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I'm not huge, like Bill's much better at the actual detecting which notes are there. For me, I just go for more general overtones of do I like the wine? Is it, fruity? Is it, for me, I break it down into herbaceous, which I'm not a fan of, as we previously talked about. Fruity, which I can get behind depending. And I'm going to go with barnyardy and or feral, possibly. I'm not sure, Bill, how you would describe that. Leathery / that kind of scene, tobacco meets smoke, those kind of things. those are like
May.
yeah, those are kind of how I
Graham,
think of wine.
not only did we skip down between the rows of grapes with the basket, we held hands while we were doing it, okay?
That's right. Yes. It was
And
glamorous.
Johan took pictures of us.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah, I just love this wine. I mean, you guys, again, if you can tell, if you have any white paper around you, the inkiness of this wine is just beautiful. It's almost like it's so beautifully dark.
It's got a deep dark color.
Yeah.
Rises up on the edge of the glass. It's got a lot of back end flavors rather than front tones.
Sure.
So not a lot of sweetness to it.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I wanted to pick this wine as well. It's a lot of people might not necessarily think to buy like a $20 bottle of Ontario wine. Like I said, it's not the general market isn't there for it really, but the price. I would argue that the price difference is worth, at least the taste difference is noticeable. I would say whether or not you think it's worth it or not, it is definitely noticeable. And Hamblish, I buy currently the largest volume bottle of wine I can get for the cheapest price because people do not come to the Grad House to pay money for things. I find they want cheap and or bang for buck. Generally speaking, I would love to have a better wine program though. The problem with
Cam, you're insulting your customers.
what do I care,
You're
man?
insulting your goddamn customers here.
I'm
You're
done
gonna
for
lose
anyway.
us.
Who cares? I'm gone. Doesn't matter.
I'm gonna click on end and that's it. Boom.
For sure, man.
Bye, Brian.
There's always Molly's.
No,
Molly's.
the baseline, even the baseline,
boarded up.
Thank you. They're interjecting one. Okay, the baseline Pelham wine, even that one is a $13 bottle, I think, or around that price, which is it's higher than I would. It's more expensive than the wines I had on available before. The problem is Baco Noir. I can argue all day that it's a good wine worth trying. The demand for it is negligible. So if I open a bottle and sell, let's say you guys can sell you both a glass, that bottle will probably remain untouched until you come again. Unfortunately, that's one of the things I want to talk about Bacos is because they're underappreciated, I think. Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. Well, I don't think mine's any better, Jerry, to be honest. I don't consider myself to be classically trained whatsoever. Like I said, I'm more of a gourmand than a gourmet.
We got a bunch of questions we should tackle.
Higher class clientele, dude.
I'm trying, man. But all these douchebags from science keep coming in. I can't help it.
Hey, we're just trying to keep you operating, doing what we can, drinking the cheap beer. We put in a big tip, though.
For sure, man.
Come on.
No comment. Bill, you think you tip?
I said we got some questions. We got some questions in the chat that we should probably tackle.
For sure.
Graham, Cab Merlot seems sweet yet dry. What's your take on that?
Me? Who's Cab Merlot? The Cab Merlots in general?
I would think he's referring to Cab Merlot in general.
So.
Oh, he's got the Henry Pelham Cab Merlot.
Oh, Henry Pelham. Oh, he's drinking it now. Okay. Oh, I don't know if I've tried that one.
Henry Pelham does not add any sugar when they're making a wine. And so his Cab Merlot would be about 13.5%, and it won't be sweet.
So that would be a longer ripening season that year, then probably.
No, just
19.
Their vintner tends to do drier wines, so he doesn't add sugar. It's one of those things that every time when you're doing a wine, particularly Henry Pelham, because their wines taste reasonably the same year to year. So it always becomes a discussion right at the beginning when you're pressing your grapes whether you should add some extra sugar in.
Okay.
So they're blending the Cab Merlots. So depending on whether it's 60-40 or 40-60 blend.
My answer to that is, generally speaking, when I first started getting into wine, I probably drank more single varietals, Graham, than I did blends because I wanted to taste the differences, like what the actual grape brought to the table, kind of like one would drink a single varietal hopped IPA, for the nuances of the actual hop. That being said, that's also because I thought that was what was normal and what was best to showcase the actual wine. I didn't know in my blossoming infancy, I wasn't aware that 99% of all wine is blended in Old World, for example. Like the most widely consumed wine, I'm pretty sure, is the Grenache grape. Back me up on that, Bill. And no one even knows they're drinking it because it's always in blends. So I like single varietals in general, but so the Cab Merlot is almost a Meritage blend, right? Bill is missing. What's it missing? That's a Bordeaux blend, right?
That's a Bordeaux blend, yeah, but
Yeah.
it's very North American.
Yeah, sure.
And it's because we don't normally get them until you're into California, like in the southern U.S. We don't get Merlots to full ripeness before we have to harvest them.
Sure. Yeah. Normally, if I'm going for Cab, Graham, I just go full Cab normally, and I go big. Like I'm a big red guy, like the gum, the chewing gum, or the Clifford the dog possibly, and I would go with the California big red Cabs myself. I don't want to support those Americans anymore like that, but hey, what are you gonna do, right? So that's kind of my go-to for Cabs myself. That's my 2 cents, Bill. I know it's not much, but it's something.
So Derek and Naomi mentioned that they sampled a 200 euro bottle of Brunello during a tasting at a winery. They wondered what our thoughts were. Is that outrageously high end wine, or within the realm of expectation?
I mean,
so the first question
yes.
is, Cam, have you ever had a $200 bottle of wine?
No, I don't think I have. I've been at some, I think some tastings, I think they might have cracked open like an $80 bottle, I think, which then you can barely, if you're a guy like me, you can barely even taste that properly because you're too worried about dropping the glass and not appreciating it enough. So I would say the most I've ever actually tried is probably closer to the $50 bottle, and even that's for me a ridiculous expenditure personally.
But is that what you would expect a high-end Brunello to cost?
Oh,
Like,
Yeah, like within our palate, I think mine probably stops at $40 too. Like that was a honeymoon extravagance.
We couldn't tell the difference between the 200 euro and the 50 euro.
It was
wine.
fantastic,
Right.
but
Okay.
that within the realm of possibility of a high-end Brunello, or is that just a wine?
Oh yeah, that's well within the realm of that region. To have something that it's based on a whole bunch of factors. If you want to hear the whole thing, is it higher up in the mountains? Is it from a particular grouping of rows? And is it an estate?
It was
reserve?
it was a reserve. It was a specific section of the winery where they called it the bonsai wine, where they like really seriously pruned it to have only the best grapes.
Yeah. So there are vineyards in Europe where they actually own there might be a 50-acre field, and they own 6 rows. But those are the best 6 rows in that whole field.
Yeah.
And those bottles will command a premium price. If you did the tasting, they started at the bottom end and took you to the top end. Did you catch the nuanced differences though at that point?
Mm-hmm.
No, that's what we were saying. Like,
Yeah.
we knew it was a fantastic wine. We couldn't really tell it apart from the 50 euro bottle, right? Like, we would never spend that because our palates are not that refined.
But it was mind-blowing good wine.
Yeah.
So it's not so much that your palates aren't that refined. If you're not drinking at that level all the time, you're not going to understand any of the nuances for the difference between that and an 80 euro bottle of wine, or a 20 euro bottle of wine for that matter.
Yeah, that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Well, my one buddy's
either awesome or not, really.
You know what? It's worth the experience.
Yeah, I'd say that for sure. My one buddy I used to bartend with, he said the difference between a $20 and $50 bottle of wine is like again to a $50 bottle to a $100 bottle. That's what he said. That being said, I've never had $175 that I wanted to spend on wine to do an actual comparison, but that was his mantra. I don't know. Again, like I think you're right, Bill, but I think we've done a little bit of experiment tonight, going up even like, $7 or $8 in a bottle does make a difference though. So I'd argue that the question is, where does that stop? Like if you spend $60, would you notice a difference? I don't know.
Yeah. So I had an opportunity when I was over for a wedding in Europe to go to a cognac manufacturer, because the best man's uncle owned the premium one in southern France. And we had everything from a 30-euro bottle of brandy to a 27,000-euro bottle, a little 250 ml bottle that they only made 300 of them a year, and they were sold out 9 years in the future.
Mm-hmm.
The second that I got past 150 euros for the cognac, I was completely lost. They all tasted the same, maybe a little smoother.
Mm.
The nuances are completely gone on something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So 27,000 euros for a bottle of cognac is because you got lots of money.
Yeah, that's true.
No, it is. You're buying something that they only make a set number every year, and no one else can get it. But I really, even as refined as my palate was, I honestly didn't know the difference between that and the 250 euro bottle that we had. So.
Yes, yeah, well met, well played. Yeah. Any other? Where else do you want to go, Bill? Where do you want to take this bad boy? Where else do you want to go? Do you have any more questions that came up that I didn't?
There's a little bit of a dialogue about Rose having wine classes back when Ed was in his master's.
Okay, fair.
At the Grat House.
I can.
Him and Terry were going back and forth. I don't think we need to go into that one.
Very good. I can say that is a verifiable fact that did happen. Yep. I did a couple of those myself, actually. I don't pretend to be a wine expert, but there seems to be not a whole lot of demand for wine classes. I don't know what it is, Bill. Is wine becoming uncool again? I don't know. Is it all cocktails and beer these days?
Well, that's the alcohol industry. Cocktails started to take off 5 or 6 years ago. And 20 years ago, when I started at Kickoff, cocktails were just like almost unheard of.
Yeah.
So everything kind of runs through a cycle.
Yep.
And it's that old adage, what's old is new again.
True.
So Cam, thank you for imparting your knowledge to us.
Well,
I want to remind everybody that next week, Graham Kobayashi's on from Counterpoint. He's back. It's a Christmas show. You will all be receiving an update email after the show tonight. Graham had to substitute, there are 3 things. Graham had to substitute the wheat beer wasn't ready, so we're going to do an English mild. And the chocolate ginger sour is not on their website because it's not being released to the public until after we've had an opportunity to buy it. And in the email, you will have a link to purchase the beers, and you will get $1 off through that link. It's automatic. So Graham's giving us our Christmas present early. So you'll have that later tonight. And the following week, I have Adam from Bashkang Brewery up in Minden area on for the New Year's week, 29th of December. So again, Cam, thank you for imparting your knowledge with us. Cheers. We all had a lot of fun.
All right, great. Thanks for having me again.